Hi, Toby. Thanks for joining me, friend.
Hi, Tasshin. Good to be here.
So, Toby is an old friend of mine. We've been friends for a decade, and we met at Maple when it was still called CML, and trained together for a time, and then worked together, and have been friends ever since, and have been increasingly close friends over the years. And so, feels really
Have
good
made a
to have
vow
you
to
here.
support each other's vows
That's
till
right.
the end of time.
We cast a early version of the "I believe in you" spell on each
Yeah,
other.
yeah.
Um, so it feels really good to have you here and to, yeah, share this friendship with the world in this way. And um, so I always start by asking people about their life story, and I'd love to hear about yours. And this is so important to me because, mm, sometimes, for example, people be like, "Are you a Buddhist?" or "What are you?" And it's like, well, I'm connected to Buddhism, but I'm also connected to a lot of other things, and I'm just me. And but if I had to choose what I am fundamentally, I would say I'm a life artist. It's like I want to make art of my life, and I think people's lives are art, and the people that I have on this show are people who are living their lives beautifully in one way or another that I'm curious about, that I'm resonant with. I'm like, oh, I like what you're doing, and I want to learn from this, and I want to grow. And so often there's like specific questions I want to ask people or specific topics I'm curious what they think about, but I love to hold those questions within a larger context of just who is this person and where did they come from and
Hmm.
what happened to them to get them to this point and how do they make sense of their own life journey and their own story. And that really also helps me to understand the specifics much better if I have it, yeah, really framed
Yeah,
in a context. So
context.
I'd love to hear from you about your story and what your life has involved so far. And you can answer that in any way you like, at whatever length you like. I'd love to hear it.
Cool. Thanks for the question. Yeah, there's so much that I could say, but I think let me try to artfully paint a picture that I think is relevant and interesting for me to reflect on as well. Um, I grew up rurally in Vermont, which I think is very important in my development. I just spent a ton of time in the woods, which gave me a very early connection to nature and spirit, really. Um, and I would say the overarching theme of my life is uh, to destroy the Ring of Power. So, one thing to take from that is I was very inspired by the Lord of the Rings trilogy as a developing mind. Another thing to take from that is like, yeah, obviously the Ring of Power in the Lord of the Rings is a metaphor for evil in the world. Uh, you could say suffering. Um, so yeah, I've always kind of had a very mission-driven value system. I think that comes a lot from my parents. I was raised Jewish, um, and like early on in my childhood, I explored music, which in hindsight was but the reason I was interested in music, I think, or partially the reason I was interested in music is because of states of high concentration that you fall into when you practice music, which relates to flow and meditation nowadays. And I, when given the opportunity to write a research paper in middle school about anything I wanted, I chose to review what our available energy sources are as a species. At that time, solar power sucked. And I was like, as a seventh grader, I was like, we really need to figure out fusion. If we figured out fusion, that would be that would be big. So that's kind of the seventh grader that I was. Um, and I was just a really motivated kid. I homeschooled myself because I was so passionate about playing the drums and meditating in the woods that I needed to do more of that. And school was like, took like fucking 8 hours a day. Like, what the hell? No. So yeah, I was very motivated, very mission driven. Um, in my like 18 to 25 years, I struggled a lot with uh, post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome. So lots of body pain, which caused me to refocus on or really learn more about meditation. It was always an interest of mine, but I had the time and the need really for the big guns, happiness independent of conditions. So during that period of my life, I focused a lot on meditation, which, is a classic blessing in disguise story where I was kind of like struggling a lot, had to learn a lot about meditation, and then that was the bedrock of the rest of my life. From the time I was like 22, I was like, oh yeah, I definitely am going to focus on meditation for the rest of my life. Like it's fucking incredible. It's so fascinating. I want to practice it and I want to teach it. And there's research happening about it, and there's a lot of people that are interested in it. And yeah, so since the time I was a young adult, really, I was very focused on meditation. Um, I joined the monastery and met you, um, which was beautiful. And then it was kind of time to move on. And I also got a dream job call. Christian, who's a mutual friend of ours, very good dude, basically called me up and said, "Hey, do you want a dream job?" And I was like, "Man, I guess I'll take a dream job." Um, so that dream job was like co-founding Brightmind, which is this meditation app based on Shinzen Young's pedagogy, which I had immersed myself in. And he was looking for people who were expert in the content. And I was a young buck, like really excited about the vision to scale meditation, quality meditation instruction. And I've been working at that since 2016. So a long time. And um, got really passionate about the project because it integrated so many of these threads that I've been interested in my whole life, where I get to teach meditation, which is something that I think moves the needle in terms of suffering reduction worldwide. I get to be really creative artistically with product design and pedagogy choices. I get to be I'm pushed to solve complex problems because I have to design and build software. So it's not like I can't just be in the clouds imagining potential futures. I have to like debug software and figure out analytics tools. And it keeps me grounded in a way that feels really good. Um, and and I was really lonely for a lot of my life. I really struggled to meet um, women to have long-term relationships with. I was really lonely for most of my life. Of course, I like dated and stuff, but it just never worked out. And so I was super blessed to meet my now wife, Hannah, um, back in like, I don't know, right before the pandemic. And yeah, we got married like 2 years ago and we're about to have a child, like literally any minute now, she's about to pop. So I feel really blessed um, to have met Hannah. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm on the precipice of being a father that has to support a family and have a successful career that supports the family. And the reason my wife and I the main reason, there are many reasons, but the main reason we decided to have a kid is because we were excited by the prospect of psycho-spiritual development that it would necessarily create. It's kind of like going into a sweat lodge where it's like, I don't know if for anyone who's ever been in a sweat lodge, it's like very intense, or it can be, but, and that sucks because it's intense, but there's also, you can't fake it. by the end of the sweat lodge, you had to have let go of something because it's so intense that you can't not let go of something. And I think fatherhood is going to be the same way, where I'm not going to be able to fake it. Like I'm going to have to grow. And it's probably going to be painful at times, but um, I'm really excited. I'm on the precipice of this massive opportunity for growth and love and connection, and while still, like doing the work that I love, with the teaching meditation and cultivating a community. That's another big theme, especially over the last years. I've cultivated um, a community of practice around Brightmind, which has been really fulfilling. Um, so I'm hard at work destroying the ring of power. Uh, my whole life has just been kind of like, how do I help people and solve problems and like seek truth in a kind of honest way. There's been all sorts of intellectual trends that we could talk about. But yeah, I think that's it. That's how I would answer the question, at least initially.
Beautiful, Tobes. Thank you, brother.
Hmm.
I'd love to ask you about early in our friendship. I don't even know how this came about. You must have mentioned them, but you mentioned that in college you wrote not one, but two papers that you were quite proud of, and maybe that were, sort of big assignments at school or something. And then I read both of the papers, and they both made an impact on me. They were quite good. And I wonder if you could speak to what those two projects were and what you wrote about in those papers.
Yeah, I would love to. So, in the spirit of putting answers into context, I'm like 23 years old. I already knew meditation was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And the question became, all right, I have like 2 years left of college. How can I leverage the experience of college to support my larger vision? Um, so I had already decided at that point that I was going to be a geography major. So I basically had to write a thesis within the discipline of geography. And pretty much, probably the largest, or at least one of the largest themes in geography and in social science more broadly. People get confused. Geography is different from geology. Geology is the study of rocks. Geography is much more like history or political science or anthropology, sociology. It's a social science. One of the biggest themes in all my classes were thinking about race and class. And so I was like, okay, geography seems to think a lot about race and class. Okay, how does that apply to meditation? And just like obviously there's a lot of people thinking about that and talking about that. Like, how does race and class manifest itself within the context of modern meditation communities in the United States? And I talked to my advisor, and he was like, okay, you got to pick a case study. It has to be, it's just a thesis. You're not writing a book. Like, pick a case study and focus your analysis on that. So I looked around for organizations that were doing interesting things around race and class specifically, and I found the Brooklyn Zen Center, which is still operating. It's a wonderful organization. And so, yeah, I did a case study on this organization and kind of explored how there's problematic aspects to the movement, um, that intersect with gentrification, for example. But there are also some really interesting healing aspects of the movement that allow people to um, connect with others and love each other is one way to put it. So I just explored that like complexity in the paper. And yeah, it's interesting because one of the intellectual threads that has evolved in my life is kind of after I wrote that piece and I started to become somewhat critical of that lens of like focusing incessantly on race and class as a question that needs to be asked constantly. Um, or specifically the frame of inaction is violence. Um, I started, not that I necessarily was believed that in the at the time, but I don't know. Over the years, I've become my understanding of that discussion, relentlessly focusing on race and class as being more complex than simply a moral good. Um, so that was one research paper, and then another research paper was in the field of cognitive science, which if at the time, if I had restarted college, I definitely would have been a cognitive science major. Um, Incredible department. I went to Vassar College, and they were one of the first colleges to offer, I think they were the first college ever to offer cognitive science as an undergraduate um, major. So, like, very sharp, visionary thinkers I got to take classes with. Um, and it was a liberal arts school, so I got to take a bunch of cog sci. I didn't have to do like all geography. And it's this fascinating intersection of like biology and philosophy and psychology and economics. It's just like so multidisciplinary and interesting, and much more interesting than the geography lens of like there's just a limited toolkit. That's one of the things I liked about cognitive science is it was interdisciplinary and appreciated the value of the truths that came from different. Like I remember having a conversation with a geography professor, and he like didn't think that genes impacted uh, the phenotype at all. Like there was it was entirely tabula rasa. Like there was no like your genes don't impact your temperament in any way. Just like what, dude? Like where do you live? This is so one-sided. But yeah, so in this cognitive science paper, I explored pedagogy, which was totally laid the groundwork for what I'm doing now with meditation. And I was trying to isolate causal what was so brilliant about Shinzen Young's pedagogy, basically. So, long story short, I did a whole year of classes and taught different students slightly different pedagogies and measured outcomes. Um, and yeah, there were a few different phases, but to cut to the end, I basically had three groups focusing on the breath, focusing on the inner world of thoughts and emotions as objects of meditation, focusing on the outer world of physical senses, what you see with your eyes, what you hear with your ears, what you feel with your physical body. Those are the three groups. And then I measured outcomes in terms of ability to practice meditation during daily life and an ability to reduce suffering during emotionally overwhelming experiences. And what I found was that the breath group did actually the best at both categories. If you were to look at who did the best at both categories, the breath group won, which is pretty interesting. And then learning how to focus on thoughts and emotions did better at suffering reduction during emotional overwhelming experiences, but not as good at practicing in daily life. And the physical senses group did best at practicing in daily life, but not as good at suffering reduction during emotionally overwhelming experiences. And I think you can kind of intuit um, why that is, or I could elaborate a bit more. But yeah, that was really cool and interesting to like isolate those variables. And it was super fun. It is also like, oh my God, teaching those classes is so meaningful. Like I wanted to like cry after every one. And that's even more when I was like, holy shit, teaching meditation. This is what I'm meant to do. This is what I should continue doing. Um, so that was a very impactful experience.
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading those papers, and it's nice to have you recount them. Um, I think I remember being really impressed. Like, wow, uh, this guy cares about interesting stuff, and he's really thoughtful about it and has learned a lot. And of course,
His
that's only
sentence
deepened with
structure,
time.
his sentence structure is so tight. Comma use, dude. Whew.
Off the charts.
Yeah, but actually, I was very verbose at that time, and I remember one thing that you and I talked about was you were like, "Dude, be less verbose, more tight. It's a better style."
Hmm.
And I was like, I think you're right." And now I'm totally like in my emails and all my writing, I'm very much shorter sentences.
Hmm.
And then Hannah, my wife, was like, "Dude, you sound like a robot. Be more verbose." And I was like, "Oh, you're right." So now I think I've struck a nice balance where like half my sentences are short and punchy, and then the other half of my sentences I'll use some extra adjectives and it'll be like somewhat of a run-on sentence, but not too much.
It's also very heartful. You're often very silly in your communications or playful or
Definitely silly.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep. Silliness is paramount,
yeah.
as
Love the
evidenced by my
background for that.
background of cats.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like I'm here to destroy the Ring of Power, and it looks like
And
this.
powered by my
Uh-huh,
cat
uh-huh,
packers.
uh-huh.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah, humor's key.
it
It
is.
really is. Even if you're trying to destroy the Ring of Power, it's important to laugh.
Hmm. What appealed to you about Shinzen's system? I mean, you've dedicated so many years of practice to his system yourself and also to spreading it through Brightmind. What really appealed to you about his system?
Um, the short answer is its effectiveness. Um, it works. It delivers insight. It leads to happiness. And I was, I mean, that's why I did the pedagogy study in college. Was I was trying to isolate like what about this is working so well. So that's kind of the question that underlied that. But excuse me. Um, I think how I would answer that question now, I could answer it in two ways. It's comprehensive, precise, and practical. That's what makes it super effective. Another way to say it, which is my favorite way of saying it lately, is it's as simple as possible, but no simpler. So he's done such a good job simplifying the things that could be simplifying, boiling stuff down, making it super practical. Here are clear strategies for integrating it into your life and to make you happy. But he also doesn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Um, he gives a variety of focus objects, which, as I was just saying, there are clear advantages to being able to work with different focus objects. That's what I found in my study. If you are going to pick one, do the breath, but like if you can learn to work with a few different ones, then um, you can move quickly with that. So, um, yeah, as simple as possible, but no simpler, and which just delivers very good results. Um, and it just fit into everything that I had. You know, as I've mentioned, I was doing meditation as a kid, um, and I had various influences, and I had some insight, and but when I met Shinzen, everything that I had done before fit into what he was describing, but I could just see that he was pointing to a way more comprehensive vision of what meditation is and what it could be, and that made me really excited, and that excitement hasn't stopped. And especially over the last few years, I've been adding in some of my own creativity and straying a bit from Shinzen's pedagogy. And so there's been this really interesting process over the last few years of mastering his system and then also taking the time to ask, well, could I tweak this or could I tweak that? and what would happen if I tweaked this, and how can I make this a little bit better, and just like adding my little piece of sand on top of the mountain, you know. um and you could say that's Brightmind, is like, here's Toby's version of Shinzen system. It's mostly Shinzen stuff, but like I've tried to make it I've tried to continue that theme actually of as simple as possible but no simpler. That's my motto for everything I do. um yeah.
I wonder if there's anything about Shinzen's system that when you're describing it or teaching it or sharing it that you tend to emphasize that maybe Shinzen himself doesn't emphasize or other people who teach unified mindfulness don't tend to emphasize. Like, yeah, I'd be curious to hear about that.
Great question. um I will. So the thing that comes to mind first off is Shinzen emphasizes floating as a focus strategy, which I'm not sure is always skillful.
Hmm.
um so to back up, there are three basic focus strategies. And focus strategy is an aspect of, it's a key component of a meditation technique. There's other things that you need, but you need to at least decide on a focus strategy. um, Inventory, cover, and float. Inventory is when you um, decide on a focus space, and then you break up that space into parts, and you systematically focus on one part at a time. This is the body scan, right? You start at the head and then you slowly move down through the whole body. That's an example of an inventory focus strategy. Cover is when you pick something to focus on and you just focus on that over and over again. So there's no moving of attention. Example of that is some forms of breath practice. The epitome of this is like breath at the nostrils, where you're just really focused on a very specific small area and you just hold your attention there. But you can focus on big stuff too, like your whole body all at once. The important part is you don't move. You just focus on something over and over again. And then float is when you allow your attention to be naturally pulled from object to object. And a lot of like quote mindfulness practices, this is the focus strategy. So a sound pulls your attention, you focus on that for a few seconds. Then a body sensation pulls your attention, so you focus on that for a few seconds. So Shinzen emphasizes the floating um, focus strategy significantly. He mentions cover and inventory, but he doesn't emphasize them. So to be clear, I'm critiquing him, but it's a pretty subtle critique. It's like you say it, but I'm saying I think you should say it more. It's like an emphasis thing. It's not like he's not saying it. He's saying it, but I just like saying it more. So I really like to give people permission to use cover and inventory. And the reason is allow your attention to be naturally pulled. That instruction is just confusing for people sometimes. It just doesn't make sense. And it makes sense to say, just bring your attention to something and hold it there. That's something they can do. So, um, yeah, and it's funny. I like, if I were to rewrite the meditations in Brightmind, I might incorporate focus strategies even sooner. Right now, it's actually pretty late in the learning journey. In Brightmind, if I were to rewrite it, I probably would integrate it sooner. But once I did introduce it, I find myself referring to it a lot. Because I think that it can be helpful for folks. And I think it's helpful in terms of skill development. I think if you do a lot of floating, yeah, you can develop concentration, but there's two different flavors of concentration: sustained concentration and momentary concentration. You only get momentary concentration with a floating practice, whereas you get sustained concentration in a cover or inventory practice. And I think that that's important for the mind. I think a lot of Shinzen students could benefit from developing more sustained concentration. They have momentary concentration down, They can momentarily focus on a variety of objects, which is a super valuable skill and it's a hard skill to develop, but they're lacking in sustained concentration on a single pointed object. So I think that's good for the mind. It leads to happiness. It doesn't necessarily have to be the first thing you learn, but it should be emphasized periodically, and you should be given the option to practice like that.
Hmm. We met in 2015, and then you left CML Maple in 2016 and have been focusing on Brightmind since then. Um, how have you tried to live your life since then, and what virtues would you say that you've cultivated during that time?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, in terms of how I live my life, the theme has continued to be destroying the ring of power, as I talked about. Um, a practice that has been very helpful for me has been to I have a retreat in Brightmind called Nurture Integrity. And basically, the practice that I go over is reflect on what your values are, like journal about it, and then reflect on how you spend your time and money and see where there's mismatch. And wherever there is mismatch, do things to reduce the mismatch in order to bring how you're spending your time and money into alignment with your values. And so periodically, I haven't done it too much recently, but for many years, every 3 months, I had a recurring calendar reminder where I would review the same document, which stated my values and a breakdown of how I'm spending my time and money, and try to be very proactive and conscious of that. Um, so for many years, the first priority in my value system was Brightmind, was my work. And it was kind of nice to be clear about that, you know? Um, I didn't mind staying late at work. It was like I've thought about it deeply, and this is clearly the most important thing in my life. So it's fine. I have no qualms about like staying focused on it. Um, but that's shifted over time. At this point, my family is my top priority. Um, and so now, um, yeah, I don't know. It just shifted how I spend my time and money. Like, um, if especially if there's something urgent at home, like I drop work, and even if it means I don't do as much work, I spend high quality time with my wife. Um, so that's been a big shift for me. Is first prioritizing the business, now prioritizing my family, and importantly, meditation has not been the first priority since leaving the monastery. And a lot of spiritual people would beat themselves up about that, which I don't think makes any sense. Like, there's more ways to be in the world than to be a monk, basically. For certain people at certain times, that might make sense. Um, and I loved my time as a monk, but I also realized that there are different value systems, and that's okay, and to just be conscious of that. And I definitely have prioritized meditation a lot more than most people do, even while living my life. Like, even while Brightmind was my first priority, I had a goal of meditating for 4 hours every Sunday and fasting. Like, I was still pretty freaking focused on meditation. Nowadays, I lead a 4 hour retreat once a month through Brightmind. I try to meditate every day. It's still like I dedicate a lot of time and energy to it. It's just not my first priority, and that's okay. So, um, and I think that that all relates to you asked about what I think you said skills I've developed. I think I've developed responsibility through running the business. Um, and the ability to triage complex issues and work with other people and communicate, um, and how to be a good husband and father about to be. These are skills that I've definitely had to develop. Uh, so that has been the focus in my life since leaving the monastery is responsibility. Another way to say that is like how to be effective in the world, uh, how to make an impact, how to affect people, how to help people, um, and how to be a good husband and be in relationship. That's been a big focus. Those have been big focuses of my life. And play. I've re-emphasized play. It's hard. It's a little hard to play when you're a monk, but you and I both love a good play. So I've also spent a lot of time like going to see music and traveling, laughing with my friends. I always, it's really important to know that in like user experience research, where they like ping people and say, "How are you doing right now in this very moment? When, what are you doing?" I think usually the highest rated activity in terms of happiness is time spent with friends. Um, and that matches my experience. So I've done a lot of that, which is great. Um, and so that all feels good. And I also know that like, who knows, 30 years from now, when I'm retired and my kids in college, I might re-emphasize meditation as a higher value. I think my wife is probably always going to be top priority. I don't think that changes. I think that's part of the vow that you helped me make. For those who don't know, Tasshin officiated my wedding. So, yeah, she'll probably always be first priority. But meditation might move up into second for a bit. I don't know. We'll see.
Hmm. How would you say you've grown as a leader during these years and through your work?
Hmm. Um, there's been an interesting back and forth between humbleness and assertion. And obviously, the only way to learn is to kind of mess up on both sides, at least a little bit, not necessarily big mess ups. And so, yeah, I think over the years I've kind of like experimented with being like really humble to the point of maybe not really being effective, and that's not really working. And then maybe a little too assertive, that's not really working. And so I've kind of like gone a little back and forth there, and I think I've finally kind of hit on a nice balance where I know when and how to be humble, and I know when and how to be assertive with the team, with people that I'm working with, which is really, it's a very subtle skill. It's very hard to develop, took years. But I think that's probably the most important trait in leadership is knowing when and how to express humbleness versus assertion. Um, and triaging. So, triaging is the skill of what's most important to work on. I've stared at so many to do lists with like hundreds of tasks. And I think I've gotten pretty good at deciding what to do, what not to do. And that's also a really essential quality in leadership, I think, because it can be hard to prioritize stuff, certain things. It can be hard to deprioritize certain things, even though you and the team really want to do it. But it's necessary because there's only so many hours in the day. Um, yeah, that's what comes to mind.
Mhm. How would you advise your past self on this skill of being humble at some points and assertive at other points and sensing which is needed and how to do that? What advice would you give someone else? For example, someone about how to do that.
Yeah, so I mean, part of me says like I don't have any advice, you'll figure it out. That's the only way to learn. But I guess one thing that comes to mind is there was, I think, a somewhat unbalanced view at the monastery where we trained that overemphasized humbleness. There was kind of a culture of um, get over yourself, uh, uh, don't don't be so addicted to your view of things. Um, if you're feeling uncomfortable, you don't need to express that. And that coinciding with my specific family system. I had an older brother who's very outspoken, big emotions, had a mom with very big emotions. And so in my family system, I learned to shut down as well. And so, and that was just reinforced in the monastery. So I think if I were to give advice to my younger self, I would say lean a bit more towards being assertive. You are bright and be confident in yeah, be more assertive. Don't be so humble. Um, don't lock stuff up. And I guess most importantly, and this kind of flows into relationships outside of work and stuff, is like if you're feeling like it, just express your emotions more. And if you have needs, like that's okay, and you can voice those, and you don't just need to acquiesce. I would really encourage myself to do more of that because, through the business and through my relationship with my wife, I've learned to um, express myself more, and it's been really helpful. It's edgy for me, but it's really helpful. But I also think that advice, I think that advice is probably relevant for you, Tashin. It might not be relevant for everyone listening because some people will have different family systems and have different um, patterns. But for me, that I could have benefited from hearing that, I think.
Yeah, I really appreciate hearing that. Um, I think we talked about this when we were last in person together about this skill and sort of not quite commiserated, but something like commiserated about it, about like, yeah, how important this skill is and how much it matters. And uh, yeah, I liked hearing your perspective just now on that. Um, you've been working on Brightmind for 9 years now, and
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what your dreams are for the future for it and what you hope for the future of Brightmind, if you have any thoughts about that or
Yeah.
where you'd like to take it or planning to or hope to.
Yeah. So, I mean, the short answer to your question is I want to be the preeminent brand and meditation instruction globally. So big dreams, big plans. I think honestly that the pedagogy and the content and the product and the technology is there. It's just a matter of getting the word out, which it's not just a matter like everyone struggles with that. So I wouldn't be surprised if I'm not able to get the word out and I continue to be a kind of lesser known brand, which is also totally chill. I love what I do. I have a solid like I'm not making buku bucks, but I have a lifestyle business. I can support my family doing work that I love. I don't need I don't need much more than that. I'm also happy with the current scale, the current everything about it. So on the one hand, I'm happy where it is. I would like to help and support more people because I think what I've developed would be really, really helpful for people. It would kind of help people upskill a bit. There are a lot of the meditation instruction is a little oversimplified, a little repetitive, and therefore people lose interest and it doesn't really have the impact that they want it to. So it's like I think I have something that people would really benefit from, and I want to support more people. And I also have this kind of side business, which we've talked about, where um, I build other people. If you're a meditation teacher, I'll build an app for you and maintain it. I would love to expand that business too. It's really fun to not just work on my product, but also work on other people's products. Um, Switch things up. I've been kind of banging my head against the same product for almost 10 years now. So it's fun to work on other projects. Um, so yeah, I would love for it to really um, explode in popularity, and I'm happy where it's at. Um, I'm definitely playing around with AI. Um, I'm not sure exactly how that will play out. I've released some beta features to like power users where I leverage like hundreds of hours of recording of me talking or recordings of me teaching. I have some ideas up my sleeve about how to do some like that's more of a Q&A experience. I have some ideas of how to do like guided practice. So there's some visions there, but we'll see how those play out. Um, but those are cool and exciting and creative, and it's really interesting to play around with this new technology that um, is really powerful. It's just really interesting and cool. And I don't know. There's so many for a variety of reasons. I may focus on other work and kind of keep Brightmind going as a side hustle because for a variety of reasons. Because I'm just interested. Like part of me wants to get into politics, local politics specifically, just as another way of destroying the ring of power. Um, or working for some other organization that has, I will have to be mission driven for sure. But just, yeah, helping the world using different modalities, different ways. I could get excited about that. Um, but I've structured Brightmind such that I'll always be able to keep it going and continue supporting my community, continue releasing new content. So I'll always kind of do it. It might fade toward other things, but we'll see. We'll see what the next few decades bring.
I want to ask about a project that we've talked about at different times that you've not done, but we've been like, oh, that would be cool, and uh, maybe you would do it, or maybe we would do it, or something. And one of the frames that was at Maple that I think we both still resonate with is of awakening and responsibility, or alternately, wisdom, love, and power, and kind of seeing the practice in terms of cultivating those qualities or those skills. And um, one way that we've talked about looking at Shinzen's work, and in particular his PDFs, is like as a awakening manual. It's like, oh, here's basic mindfulness, unified mindfulness. These are ways of it was basic mindfulness when I learned it. Now he calls it unified mindfulness. Like this is a way of practicing and cultivating awakening, going in that direction of doing real, genuine contemplative meditation practice. that has liberative insights and shifts things, to put it lightly. And you were like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if there was a responsibility manual? And of course, there's a billion books about, business and leadership and organizations and stuff like that. But I'm curious if you were to do a responsibility manual, what you would want to include in it and what that might look like.
Best question ever. um, yeah. I might write a book someday, and if I do it, the working title would be Awakening and Responsibility: How Meditation Leads to Effective Action. Um, and maybe you'll co-author it with me, Tosh Bear.
Mm,
Um, that would be fun. Yeah, so as you say, there's a lot of books on spiritual practice. There's also it's tough because there's also so many books on like how to be effective, how to be responsible, blah blah blah. So it's going to be hard to say something unique and powerful. Part of what could be unique and powerful is like really focusing on the intersection. Like, where do these two worlds meet? Like, obviously, there's a lot to say about how to be effective in the world. Like, um, there's like years and years of stuff that you could study, but like, without getting into that, like, where do the two worlds intersect? I'm just like focusing specifically on that, and I don't know. Um, so so one route that we could maybe explore in such a book would be meditative practices that specifically integrate the two worlds. So, decision making meditation, um, nurture trustworthiness, which I know that you love,
mm.
right? That's a meditation practice that develops meditation skills, but also like allows you to iterate and refine how you act in the world. Um, like the nurture integrity stuff that I was talking about a few minutes ago, in terms of like, what are your values? How do you manifest your values in your time and money? Um, I think internal family systems falls into this category too. It's a really interesting style of practice where you're both meditating but also really developing your ability to be an effective human. So yeah, one idea could be like, what are practices? What are practical practices that integrate the two? But I'm not even sure that's not the full piece, because I'm not necessarily sure that focusing on these types of practices is the best way to be responsible. It could be that just doing breath practice helps you develop concentration, which is going to be the most effective. So I'm not sure that like you have to integrate both worlds into your meditation practice. I'm not sure that I question that assumption. So it's more like, here are some practices that happen to integrate the two worlds. So another kind of angle we could take is like giving people a conceptual framework for happiness overall. And that's kind of like the tradition that Shinzen created and that you and I both kind of value, is like, could we make something that's comprehensive, precise, and practical? Could we make something that's as simple as possible but no simpler? But it would have to go beyond meditation practice. Um, and so we could create some kind of precise and practical and comprehensive framework for like how to live your life. And like that would start with like the basics, which is like diet, exercise, um, sleep, Um, so you could kind of give people a broader conceptual framework for stuff that you should be doing in order to be an effective human, and meditation is just a component of that. But really quickly, it starts to sound like a really bland self-help book. That's what I'm worried about with that direction.
Hmm.
Another way of answering your question is it's not a book. It's like an elementary school or high school. There's like there's like 40 classes. And so another ever since or I remember I said that I homeschooled myself in high school. Part of what made me excited about homeschooling, and I say homeschool myself because my parents were not involved at all. I, as a 15-year-old, I went to my mom and dad and was very passionate. And I wrote like a 40-page curriculum as a 15-year-old about what I was going to do and submitted that to the state and got it approved. And um, ever since I was a kid, I've had this vision of like what high school could be. And so I kind of created that for myself. But ever since then, I've always been like, man, I could totally come back to that vision. Especially now with a kid on the way, I might. Um, So another way to answer your question is like, dude, that's it's way too much for a book. It's a high school.
Hmm.
And we do the shit that everyone says is obvious. Like you learn how to do your taxes, you learn a ton about nutrition, you learn a ton about sleep. Everyone learns an exercise routine that works for them. Everyone learns a lot about meditation. Everyone learns emotional intelligence. Everyone learns like DBT skills, like how to communicate effectively, reflective listening. Everyone is set up with like an artistic practice that works for them. Like, what do you want to do? You want to do music? You want to do art? You want to do movement? Like, um, everyone is encouraged to cultivate like intellectual pursuits that work for them. uh, Epistemology is key, super key. Everyone has to understand basic epistemology. Like, how do we know what we know? How can you know anything? What is the scientific method? What is empiricism? What else? How to interact with the healthcare system. That would be huge. There'd be a whole class on that. Um, how to save money, financial strategies. So I think it's more of a high school than a book.
Hmm. ¿Por qué no los dos?
It could be Los Dos. Maybe the book would be it would be like a bullet pointed curriculum
Mhm.
for the high school.
Hmm. One of
And then we
the,
could fill it in over the years or whatever.
I'm reminded that, I went to St. John's and read the great books there. And when I went in, my goal was to have read the great books. It's like, oh, I'm going to have read those books and they're so important and I'm going to have read them. I'm going to be the kind of guy that's read Hegel. I'm going to be the guy that's read Kant. I'm going to be the guy that's read all these books. And when I got out, I was like, well, yeah, I've read those books and that's all well and good, but now I actually know how to read and how to write and have a conversation and ask questions, for example, which is a part of the lineage of this podcast. It's just like asking questions
Yeah.
of people. And similarly, I think I used to think the purpose of writing a book was like to have written a book and to have people understand your ideas and to spread your ideas. And it's like, well, that's true, of course. But also, similarly, for me, the value of writing a book is just to articulate to oneself how you see something.
Mhm.
I've been thinking of doing this with Maple actually, of like, I don't know. We'll see if I do, but I'd like to write an essay for myself that's just for myself about like what happened in my 20s and what it was like to be at Maple and what that experience was like and what I liked and what I didn't like and what I felt was really helpful and what didn't work so well. And just to explain that to myself, like, here's what happened as far as I can tell and how I see it, and like really validate my own perspective, which is nuanced and complex and is not unequivocally good or bad. It's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was my 20s. That's what my 20s was. And I think similarly, the value of writing a responsibility manual or like an awakening and responsibility manual, that it would be intrinsically beneficial just to explain to oneself, here's how I think about these things. Here's how we think about these things. And of course, that would be in service to others also in the end. But like starting from there of just like, well, how do I see this? I have a lot of thoughts about this, but how do they fit together? And um, at this point, I've done that with each of the three areas of my own life's work: love, curiosity, and empowerment. And those are books that I plan to update once a year,
Mhm.
indefinitely, or, every 2 years or 3 years or something, but add to and change and edit and revise and hone. And uh, those are really important parts of my life. And having just explained to myself, here's how I see these things, has been really valuable. And of course, other people get to read it and get to benefit from it. And there is that benefit. But yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, and I think it would be really helpful for me to, or for us to like
Hmm.
explore that and get it down on paper. And
Hmm.
you're right that, yeah, and it's, as I said, especially with I have this daughter coming, so it's like,
Hmm.
how do I want to, what do I want to teach her?
Hmm.
What is the stuff that I think are really is really important?
Hmm.
And having some clarity there could be really helpful.
What are your prayers for your daughter?
Hmm. Um. Well, every day I recite, "May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be peaceful." Those are some good ones. Um, I pray that she finds love, even if it's later in life. I pray that uh, she feels connected to a mission. A lot of young people, including myself, they're not really sure what to do in life. And I think, especially globalization and our modern times, exacerbate that issue. And it can be hard to be a young person these days. So, but you see some young people, and they have their thing, and they're super into it, and they're really they have that drive, that mission. So, and there's a sense of happiness that comes with that, I think. So I pray that she finds that, and I don't care what the hell it is. Like, I'm gonna be so supportive of her no matter what she's interested in. Doesn't have to be meditation, doesn't have to be whatever. Like, it would be great if she. I pray that she has a mission, and that's clear enough. It doesn't have to be perfectly articulated, but it's enough to like take the next step. You know. Um, I don't know. That's what comes to mind.
Beautiful. May it be so. Hmm.
Amen.
Hmm. I wonder if there's anything that you'd like to talk about or that you'd like to ask about. You've very kindly answered a lot of questions that I have, and maybe there's something you'd like to dive more deeply into or talk more about. Does anything
Yeah.
like that come to mind?
Yeah, one thing that comes to mind is I listened to your conversation with Vince Horn, a mutual friend of ours, like a week ago or so, and you were talking about Palestine. And I would love to like reflect on that conversation and um, bring up some questions and comments and hear what you think about them.
Hmm. Please.
Sure. So, from what I remember, Vince's main argument was something like it's immoral that people aren't posting on social media about Palestine.
Hmm.
Was that your sense of it? I don't want to oversimplify it, but I think that was kind of what I heard him say.
I didn't hear him frame it that way. I think he was surprised and distraught and upset that people weren't posting more about it.
Okay. So I mean, I think if you're upset, then maybe I'm overstating it by saying like it's immoral or something like that. So you could say he's upset that people weren't posting about Palestine on social media.
Hmm. And specifically like a specific community that we're
Right. Teapot
connected to, Teapot.
specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So assuming that that's what his position was, and again, I don't know if I necessarily have, I'm open to being wrong about that. It's hard because he's not here, but I
Hmm.
wish he was here. Um, I can certainly relate to that. Um, but I do think that that position, I guess anyone's, yeah, I think that breaks down in two key ways, that
Hmm.
position. First thing is there's an assumption underlying his position that posting on social media in some way helps
Hmm.
the cause. Um, and I'm not sure, I don't have strong, if I were to guess, posting on social media about political issues, if I were to guess, I would say it probably hurts things, not helps. As we know, the introduction of social media into our culture has increased polarization and decreased common sense,
Hmm.
right? There's been like a lot of research on that.
Hmm.
The more social media there is, the more people try to talk about politics on social media. The medium creates more polarization and less common sense, less connection, less solutions.
Hmm.
So my accusation is that, or I don't think I agree with an underlying assumption that he
Hmm.
has, that posting on social media is helpful. Now, it could be, it could be neutral. I would say it's probably not helpful. Um, but yeah, I'd be curious to hear what he thinks about that. And then, even if that were the case, even if it's true that posting on social media about political issues, even if we knew that that was helpful, I still think that it's a little funny to be super upset that people aren't posting about it because um any I think there are a lot of ways to destroy the ring of power, to
Hmm.
use my own metaphor. And to it relates to what I was saying before about inaction as violence. But let me just try to explain it as simply as possible, which is like, I don't know, I've never understood people that get upset about other people not being passionate about what they're passionate about.
Hmm.
It's like, then the easiest, like, global geopolitics is very confusing, very intense, and honestly very abstract for most people. And if you're not interested in global geopolitics, I'm not going to be upset at you. The easiest way to falsify that position is um, think of a mother. Like, so some mother is spending all of her time and energy taking care of her three kids, and she's really focusing on it, and she's doing a really good job, and she's raising three wonderful kids. Like, you can't get upset at her for not being really engaged and knowledgeable about global geopolitics.
Hmm.
I don't think it makes sense in my value system to get upset at her for that. I think that's like the easiest example. It's just an example. It's not something more than an example. It's just an example of like falsifying any single issue. And what I'm saying here is relevant not only to the issue of Palestine, it's also relevant to climate change, healthcare, housing, even non-political issues like health or meditation or fashion, or like you just it just doesn't make any sense to get upset at someone for not being interested or engaged with a specific issue.
Hmm.
Like, there's a wealth of personalities out there, and um uh just because someone isn't interested or engaged with something, especially as abstract and intense as global geopolitics, uh I just think it doesn't make sense. And I actually should have started by saying, uh, I should have started by saying I 100% agree that it's a genocide in Gaza. I would 100% agree that leaders should be doing everything we can to stop it. I am personally horrified by it. I personally spend a lot of time listening to history lectures, trying to understand context, analyzing political thought. Like personally, I'm very interested in it. Um, but I understand that other people aren't, and that's okay. Um, but yeah, I think it's a moral outrage. Uh, Palestine is, but I just the specific around like expecting everyone to be super passionate about it, I think doesn't make any sense because there are so many things to be passionate about. There are so many hours in the day. You do have to choose what you're going to do,
Hmm.
and like you obviously can't address all of the important issues in the world. Like not one person can address housing and climate change and Palestine and their own health and their own relationships. It's like there's just you have to pick and choose. There's no way you can do everything that's good in the world. So you can't get upset at someone for not being passionate about a specific issue. And then two, even if you could, um, I don't think I'm doubtful that posting on social media is helpful. If anything, it's hurtful.
Hmm.
So that's my rant.
I have several thoughts about a lot of thoughts about things you just said. First, I don't think you've accurately represented his position very well.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was upset at people in Teapot who are not just like a random mother that, has children and needs to be immersed in her family. It's like he's saying, hey, you are cultural leaders and you have an impact. What you do matters and your perspectives matter and are actively changing culture and the world. And uh, you should use that power responsibly. And so he's saying leaders should speak out about moral issues. Um, that when you have power, that you should use that well. I think that that's maybe along the lines of what he was thinking. He didn't say that explicitly, but I think that's part of why he's upset with teapot people is like, hey, you're having a enormous cultural impact, and this is a blind spot that you have. I think he's right that there's a blind spot there. I think he's just straightforwardly right. Um, I think it's a little bit of a red herring to substitute it with global geopolitics. He's like, this is, yeah, I mean, in his frame, it's this is a genocide, and you agree this is a genocide. Um, that's more than like a hobby or an interest or something like that. It's like, why isn't everybody excited about a board game that I like or even meditation or something? It's like, hey, there's moral outrage being perpetuated right now, and you should know about it. Um, I think that that's more along the lines of his position. The last thing I'd say is, well, I don't really agree with what you said about social media. I don't know. I haven't done as much research, but as you have, and I know that people talk about social media that way. But I mean, this is social media. Us having this conversation that we're going to post later today is social media, and here we are talking about it.
I think
Let
it's
me just
different to have
finish my
long
point,
form.
please.
All right,
Let me
cool.
finish my point, please. I think that what he pointed to is that what we do matters. And he's saying how you speak about something matters, and what you speak about and what you don't speak about matters. And he was advocating you should speak about this. It does matter. And it's interesting to me from that perspective that I found in my mind a belief, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't help. Uh, and I've been actively questioning that. And I've started to speak out about this more in ways that feel aligned with my own values, which are maybe different than his. But it's like, yeah, this does matter. And I should speak out about this. And that's actually a very normal thing for leaders to do of any kind is like, I like the Pope, for example, like the day after I first saw Vince talk to me about this, I saw a tweet from the Pope where the Pope was like, "This is an atrocity. This. I condemn this." It's like, yeah, that's what leaders do is they speak the truth to their community, and even when it's uncomfortable, and even when people might disagree with them, and that's been a really useful like moral koan for me, I would say, of like what is the way to relate to this skillfully. And I think you're right to say, yeah, I sympathize with a lot of the things you said, but I guess my objections would be twofold. One, I don't think you're representing his position fairly, and two, which is reasonable, he's not here. But second, I think that what we do matters, and how we should act is up to each of us. But I think that's something I saw him standing for that I'm quite sympathetic to, actually. And I would disagree. Oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't help it. I think it matters how you do it as well. But
Hmm.
that's some thoughts that come up for me in response to what you said.
This is interesting. That's super interesting. Thanks for sharing. Um, yeah, I'm not sure how to respond. I think I'm kind of running out of steam in terms of mental
Mm-hmm.
juice.
Mm-hmm.
But those are good points. Uh, I think what I hear you saying is it's not just run of the mill geopolitics. It's a peak in violence in world history.
It seems that way, yeah. I still feel pretty woefully ignorant about what's happening right now, and uh, but yeah, it doesn't it seems different than like oil flows from countries to country or like economic trends or something like that. It feels
Sure.
salient to the human condition
Hmm.
at this time.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I could see that.
I think there's a difference between also I didn't mention this in the conversation with Vince, but there's a tweet from my friend Jess, Udo Translucence, Jess Ocean, where she says like forcing every activist to care about every issue is like a DDoS attack. It's a specific metaphor, but basically,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
you can't.
exactly.
But I think I would develop some nuance about that. I'm sympathized with her position, and I think there's a difference between like being aware or being informed or like having thoughtful having thought about something and felt things about it and like what you decide to put a lot of time and energy into working on. Like it makes sense to prioritize what you take action on and what you specifically work on. Like I'm working on the Service Guild, for example. You're working on Brightmind. It's not that everybody needs to work on meditation or everyone needs to uh, work on, yeah, like race and class issues that came earlier or,
Yeah.
genocide. But like, I think it does behoove us to be aware of what's happening and to consider it and to speak about it also. I think that does matter and seems like a baseline for participation in the world.
Mm, hmm. What about just to play devil's advocate? Why isn't he saying that about global warming and teapot?
Hmm. Well, it makes sense that Vince would care a lot about that. His family is directly affected by it, and I mean, his heart is breaking on a daily basis about it. He has many, many family members that are connected to that are at risk, people that have died. Like, of course, he would think and care more about that in the immediate than global warming.
Right, but that's not relevant for the teapot. That's relevant for his upset,
Hmm.
but that's not relevant for everyone else's priorities.
It makes sense to
Like, I think you
me.
could make the argument that global warming is probably killing and will kill many more people than
Mhm.
Palestine.
I mean,
Obviously,
I'm
that's a utilitarian perspective. Obviously, whatever, there's you could argue with that. But um yeah, I guess I just don't understand why that gets a special treatment compared to all of the other atrocities, all of the other things that you could get upset about.
I think there's a difference between what Vince would care about personally and like what he's pointing to in the scene, Teapot, of like, hey, I care about this personally, which makes sense that he would care about it personally, that his heart would be hurting about this. That
Totally.
makes sense to me. And I think that from that perspective, he is acutely and painfully aware of what I think is a really valid blind spot in this community that he and I and you are both connected to of it's trade-offs, right? Like there's always trade-offs in communities and different things, but it's like, hey, from the vantage point of the culture we're creating, we don't talk about things like this. We don't take moral stances on them. We don't ever say what we think or what we feel. It's sort of in the shadows. And just to name that is uncomfortable and challenging on any scale for an individual or a group to be like, oh, there's a blind spot there. And I think he's really has an important care about that blind spot of like, um, hey, this really isn't going to work for you, and you need to fix this. This blind spot is not going to solve you. And yes, it is related to this genocide in particular and a moral stance, but I think that's the larger care about is like, can you stand for things morally? Will you speak up when things aren't working? Like, will you speak your truth? Will you be willing to engage in difficult conversations? Will you? Yeah.
I just there's infinite shadows
Hmm.
taking that logic.
Hmm.
Like
I mean, that's the
there's
bodhisattva
so
vows, right?
there's so many things that we're not talking about.
I am reminded of the bodhisattva vows. It's like
Yeah.
greed, hatred, and ignorance without end. Like vow to break them. Like
Yeah.
it is endless, and it behooves us to look at them. We have committed to looking at them. We have committed to resolving them anyway. And how you do that, like that, what it looks like right now is us being willing to have this conversation and be uncomfortable and be like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't know. I'm sitting with a lot of confusion and pain and heartbreak. I don't know what to do. I don't know who's right or how to fit all these perspectives together. And just to look at that, just to honestly be like, yeah, this is uncomfortable and it matters, and I'm willing to look at it or learn about it. I think that's feels like the right place for me right now, and even to be willing to speak about it. I think that's been an update for me. I think before he was right. It's like, yeah, Tasshin as a person was not willing to talk about this, not willing to look at this. That feels like moral character growth on my part through these conversations. In that way, and that way, it does matter, right? Like him speaking out about it has made a moral impact on me. I am a better person because he's chosen to speak out about it, and uh, I think that heals the system as well, the culture, the scene. And will that lead directly to the end of genocide? Maybe not, probably not. But like we're here to learn and grow morally, and it may in fact lead to that. So we shouldn't stop. And same with global. I care very much about global warming. I care very much about what I would call speciesism, our human tendency to prioritize humans over plants or animals or the earth. That breaks my heart constantly. And to speak out about that and be like, hey, this isn't working for us. This is an enormous, like species level blind spot that we think that we're more important than plants and animals and the earth in ways that are so subtle to us because we have that blind spot, but are so obvious if you're a plant or an animal or the earth. And yeah, it inspires me to speak out about all of the things that I'm morally outraged about. And will I be able to directly solve them? No. But I do think speaking out matters and being willing to have conversations, see different perspectives, learn from people. Like, what are you seeing? What are you caring about? Clearly, you're caring about things that are also true and also valid and contribute. And I think we solve these collective issues together through talking about them. And I'm really glad that he was brave enough to say his perspective, even though he was hurting. And it's scary to speak out. And I admire that about him.
Yeah, it was interesting. One thing that you said earlier on, which is kind of I'm curious how I guess how you would relate to the perspective. Like early on in the conversation, you said something like, "That's not how I use Twitter,"
Hmm.
and that's
Social
kind of
media, I
what.
think I said.
Sure, right. That's not how I use social media, and I guess that's kind of where I'm trying to explore is there are different ways to use social media, and political
Hmm.
discussions is one way.
Hmm.
Um, I guess I'd be curious, like, has this conversation updated that perspective for you? Are you rethinking how you use social media?
Not really thinking of rethinking how I use it. I think it doubles me down on my perspective, but I want to what it does have me is like I really notice I care about spreading the way that I relate to social media. And like I do think I don't know, I don't know as much about it as you seem to, but like the default ways that people seem to be relating to social media kind of don't work for people and aren't skillful and like can cause a lot of hurt. And I think there's a different way of relating to it that everyone has to. It's tricky because everyone has to find it for themselves. It's basically like this is the way I would frame it right now. I think a lot of people are stuck in a frame of either technology is good or bad. Either social media is good or bad. And from that perspective, it's really easy to find evidence that it's bad or hurtful and then be like, okay, it's addictive. We should walk away. Like we should shut these down, use it as little as possible, that kind of thing. If you're in that frame, that makes sense that you'd polarize towards it's bad. The frame that I hold is if I had to describe it in words, it just sort of emerged, but is like, what is the right relationship to have with these technologies? How do I want to use these? How can I participate in this in a way that is aligned with my values and who I am and what I care about, where I'm going? And I think that's a much more generative and alive and healthy way to relate to it but it requires work. It requires knowing yourself and putting an effort to being like trying things and being like what works for me um, so that for me gives me so much life and I learn so much and grow and make so many friends and um, my life is just so vibrant because I've learned how to use it in a way that resonates for me and is life-giving and from that perspective this other frame of like is it good or bad is just it's like asking if a knife is good or bad. Yeah, I think that the metaphor of a knife is really important for power of like yeah you can cut yourself with a knife, you can cut off a whole limb with a knife and just don't do that. Like make dinner, like be skillful about how you use this power. Like make yourself a salad, cut the tomatoes very precisely, don't cut your finger off, be mindful while you use it. I think social media and technology in general are just like that. And because it's new, we don't know how to use it as well. I think this is something we should teach in this high school is like how to relate to internet and the technology
Oh,
and things in
totally.
a
That's
skillful way.
definitely a class.
Hmm.
That is definitely a
I had
class.
to learn that for myself because there wasn't a class and it's been so valuable to me. And I would really hate to see people just deciding, oh, this is bad because like knives are bad, like never use a knife, never go near a knife because knives are bad. It's like, yes, you can cut yourself. Please don't cut yourself. This is what cutting yourself looks like. Don't do that. Instead, learn to use it well. Learn how you want to
True.
use it.
Yeah, I guess I'm still kind of stuck on the infinite shadow thing.
Hmm.
Like, it's true that he's pointing to something that a certain culture isn't talking about. But there's lots of important things that that culture isn't talking about. And I guess I wonder like why do all cultures have to talk about all important things? Like I think one of the unique things about Teapot is it has this unique interest. It has these specific themes that the community is based around. Which are fucking sweet themes, like spiritual development, IFS, intellectual curiosity, um, blah blah blah. Like those are interesting and important things. Of course, there are other important things in the world. Like
Hmm.
no one's saying that those are the only important things. I never understand why people make that accusation. I guess I'm wondering if you have
Do you remember a time
any
where
insight
you
into where he's.
do you remember a time where something familiar to this came up where you were like upset that someone cared a lot about something or like a similar thing happened to this where like, Vince is saying, hey, more people should talk about this. And you're like, I don't understand why you think everyone should talk about this. Is there something similar that happened in the past that you can remember like that?
Well, I brought it up earlier with like that was part of my intellectual development during college is like for a few years during college, the worldview of the geography department was that race and class,
Hmm.
if you're not talking about race and class, there's a huge shadow
Hmm.
and there's a huge problem and you need to be
Hmm.
talking about this.
Hmm.
And so I adopted that for a while and that made sense to me for a while. But then I realized like it's really just it's definitely an important thing. But there are lots of important things and there are lots
Hmm.
of important factors. And it's just kind of like, um, I mean, there are other like genocides and famines happening in the world.
Hmm.
I think the statistics for famine in Sudan right now are even worse than Gaza.
Hmm.
I think there are more people suffering from famine right now. I don't know. It's somewhere in Africa. It's either Sudan or some other place. But like, so why isn't like I don't know. There's
Well,
lots
I
of
don't know
other
about the
issues talking.
Sudan, and maybe I should learn about that, but I do know that part of the reason to care about Palestine is that the American government, which you and I are both American citizens, uh, has moral causal responsibility
Totally.
for what's happening in Palestine. That may also be in the case in Sudan. I am ignorant, so here we are. But
No, you
I think.
definitely. Yeah, I think our so we're citizens of a country that is supporting genocide
Mhm.
through.
And I think, but to actually respond to your question though, it seems like you've come to, I would imagine, let me just check that this is right and then I'll reflect on this. I imagine that you've come to a place where you're like, hey, not everybody needs to talk about race and class all the time. It's not the solely important thing. In fact, it can sometimes be detrimental to talk about that.
Mhm.
And yes, race and class are important. Like I see why people care about that. It does have an impact. Sometimes we should talk about it. We should reflect on this. And that you've come to like kind of a middle way between the two extremes of like never talk about it, it doesn't matter, to like always talk about it. It's the only frame that matters. It is the one true variable that really matters or something like that.
Yeah.
hmm So I think in this case, previously, I was in a kind of never talk about it frame with not only Palestine and Israel, but larger things like that, and that's the shadow of Teapot that Vince was pointing to that I feel like I was subject to, and it's pretty easy to go towards a middle way from there of just like, yeah, I'm willing to have a conversation like this with you or with someone else, and
Mm.
that feels like an important moral growth. And I don't know, we as individuals can make sense of our own lives and what we should prioritize or what we want to talk about or what we don't want to talk about. And I think just for me personally, updating towards, hey, be willing to look at this, be willing to think about it, be willing to speak about it, be willing to have a conversation. Am I going to make the whole of my life solving this issue right now? No, I have other concerns and priorities, but it feels, yeah, I think that's the last thing I'll say about this is at this moment is I am part of Teapot, such as it is. I like that Andrew Rose calls it the network, this embedded community, like a web of people. And I'm also, you and I are both, we've both taken bodhisattva vows. And I think that was one of Vince's questions is like, what are Buddhists obligated to? What do we value as Buddhists? And of course, there's many Buddhisms and many kinds of Buddhists. But for me, the bodhisattva vows, it's like, at the very least, I should be willing to look at this and learn about this and reflect on it. That feels in alignment with the vows I took. And I think everyone has to wrestle with that for themselves about what ethics are and what morality. But
Yeah.
to me, with my vows, it felt important to just be willing to learn about this and have a conversation about it.
That's interesting. I think we're getting somewhere.
hmm
It's interesting. What I hear you saying is um, what's skillful is some kind of middle ground in general. And a lot of people in Teapot were like not even there. They were kind of all the way to one side. Which that really actually though gets to the heart at what I'm struggling with, which is like I guess I'm honestly not sure if people need to be in the middle ground for a specific political issue or politics in general.
What do you think
Um,
is important for Toby right now? Toby as a person, just in general, like with this or anything else? Like what? Yeah, I'm curious about what you think is important for you right now.
well, we've talked a lot about that earlier in the
hmm
conversation.
hmm
My first priority is my family.
hmm
Um, one of my values on my list is intellectual rigor and also like just learning about the world and history.
hmm
Like I said, like I'm very passionate about understanding politics personally,
hmm
and I spend a lot of time studying politics.
hmm
So I definitely love talking about it. I guess I'm wondering if okay, my knee-jerk reaction is you don't need to move people to the middle ground on a specific issue ever. Like people are allowed to be interested in what they're interested in. But I wonder if that perspective, which is like kind of my knee jerk perspective, is kind of like what's fucked up and dumb about postmodernism,
Hmm.
right? Postmodernism is like it's all relative. There are no absolutes.
Hmm.
And I think maybe what you're saying and a bit of what Vince is saying is there are some absolutes, there are some not everything is relative. Like a lot there's a moral atrocity and like everyone should be talking about this at least to some extent.
I don't know if I'm comfortable with agreeing with that. There's something along those lines, but just like I'll take ownership of myself, okay, of Tashin's perspective.
Sure, sure.
Like I strive to be a good person and to learn about ethics and morality and to live it to the best of my ability. I am humble in that of like I'm aware of many mistakes that I made or imperfections that I have. And for me, I'm glad that Vince pointed to this blind spot. It felt like I am subject to it and I've learned and grown from talking to him about it. And I would like to learn about these things. I would like to speak about these things. I would like to have conversations about these things.
Mm,
As for what other people should do, I think that's up to them. I don't feel comfortable morally prescribing what you should do or what someone else should do. I have thoughts or opinions, but
I guess that's exactly what I'm saying though.
hmm hmm
Because it's interesting that Vince feels comfortable doing that. It sounds like it had a positive impact on you, which is interesting, which is great.
I think that there's a way in which the way that Vince does that is like I think I could maybe in a private conversation, for example, and not that I feel the need to do this, but like you and I have a friendship such that if I thought you were making some kind of moral error, I could be like, Toby, I think I'm seeing this. I think you should do this instead. And maybe I'd be right, maybe I'd be wrong, but like that's an affordance within the friendship that we have that we've built over a decade of like, yeah, we're not just friends of like hanging out, but we also care about virtue and the bodhisattva vows and our spiritual path and that we want to support each other in that. And so I think that what Vince was doing was kind of along those lines of like, hey, these people that I'm connected to, I think you should do
Right. Hey,
better.
friends.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I mean I consider Vince a friend. I consider him a mentor and a peer, and so I'm grateful that in that relationality he was like, "Hey, you could be doing better.
Hmm.
Please do better." And is that a like broad moral stance that everyone should take at all times? Like I don't he might say something like that. I can't speak for him, but in that relationality of that relationship, I was grateful for that. And I do think that we have it's not completely relative. Like we do have the right to, within certain contexts. That's another thing is it's all just contextual. It's like
For
we have a
sure.
friendship. We've talked a lot about that. There's so
Right.
much context here.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like he was talking in a specific context, which is to a specific group, which of people that he has relationships with and he cares
Mhm.
about.
And some people who he
That
doesn't,
is
because he's
sure
he's like, yeah, he's sort of prickly at the
upset.
edge of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep.
I'm curious how you feel right now. Like, how does having talked about all this feel?
Yeah, good question. So I was a little triggered when we first started going,
Hmm
but then I relaxed into that. And then there was periodic moments of like um, relief and interest
hmm
because I think that because I thought that we were like genuinely communicating about something subtle
mm hmm
and appreciating that. So in this moment, I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to like get somewhere with someone.
hmm
Um, so yeah, how did it feel for you?
It's interesting. Some combination of scary and care. I would say like care or passion, um, and I'm grateful because both. How to put it? I don't think I would have been capable of this conversation a couple of months ago before I had these interactions with Vince. And like, I don't know, I'm reminded I was on the debate team in high school and I went really hard on that for a while. And then I realized, oh, like trying to treat conversations as a debate that you can win or lose is like just such a suboptimal way to relate to humans. And then I kind of like went hard on the other side of like never debate anyone, never stand for anything ever,
Right,
just be curious about people, like don't
right.
stand for anything morally. And I'm like, well, what if I like was like, no, I think this does matter in some way, like a little bit. And you do you, King, but like I'm going to stand for
Yeah,
something a little bit over here. So that feels good, even if it's vulnerable or scary. And I feel grateful that our friendship is like a safe place to do that and even like fuck up a little bit or just like be a little messy. It's like, yeah, it will be okay if we have a disagreement, and that feels nice.
yeah, I love that. Dude,
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I think I've gone through similar swings too.
Uh,
Of like, I mean, that's kind of what I was experiencing to relate back to a theme that we talked about a while ago in terms of like the the culture of the monastery being about like just listen, right? And
totally.
you'd there just be receptive, and then over the years learning in order to be a leader, you have to have stances that you're firm on.
Hmm.
And so it's that subtle dance, but it's a skill that you can develop.
It is, and I'm really, really grateful for my friends in it because, like in you and Vince and other people, because I really don't think these are things we can solve or even see clearly on our own. And I
Yeah.
learned from the perspectives you shared, and I learned from the perspectives that Vince shared, and we kind of have to look at this together and feel it, feel it. I think it really matters just to feel it
Yeah,
together. Like
totally.
what are we feeling about all this, and to be willing to feel really uncomfortable feelings about
Yeah,
things, and then to act from there, like do our best to make sense of what to do and just try something. And I'm grateful for my friends in that because I don't feel like I could see this clearly alone or how to
totally.
figure out how to act alone.
I agree with that for sure. It's political issues are so complex, and we all come to them with worldviews.
Hmm.
And so it's really helpful to have friends share their worldviews.
Yeah, I would even say like moral issues, just broadly, like political issues would be a subset of that for me, but just
Sure.
like how
Yeah.
to be a good person in the world really matters, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm especially glad to do with friends.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. I've enjoyed it and learned a lot about you, and I love you, and I am wishing you and Hannah and your incoming baby daughter so much love. And yeah, thank you for taking the time to speak with me, friend.
Thanks, Tasshin. So fun.
Mm.
So fun to jam. Um, yeah, and I liked how there was kind of like two sections where it was like, Toby, tell me about your life, and then like an intense intellectual debate
Uh-huh.
about something super specific.
Uh-huh.
It was nice.
Indeed.
Nice way to spend the
Indeed.
morning.
And hashing out a
Yeah, and
book project in there too.
yeah, dude, that was my favorite question.
Uh-huh.
That was clarifying for me.
Hmm.
So I'll be in touch with about that. I'll share a Notion doc,
Ooh,
a
juicy.
collaborative Notion doc
Juicy.
about
Wow. That's a love
what
language
high
right
school
there.
should be.
Yeah. Okay. Love you,
Um,
Toby.
love you too, man. Thanks so much for hosting the combo.
My pleasure.